Angular Orange here with a tutorial on intercomponent communication. First, we're going to describe the application that we want, the requirements, and then we're going to go through a code example describing how to implement that behavior. Now, this is not a perfect example. It's just to train you on how to communicate in the simplest form in an Angular application. So here are the requirements. We want a web page with a text field, and when you enter a product in the text field, the green markup fragment is going to tell us when the product is being purchased, or let's say ordered. And then we're going to result in, after the product is ordered, we're going to result with a string displaying that shows us when the product is ordered. Okay, now if you look at this application, the first thing you should look at, and this is why I like coloring markup fragments, is because it gives you a clear understanding of how you could implement that in Angular. So right now, it's sort of, you're not told what to do with UI components in Angular. You're just being told that you have this application and you're going to enter a product in a text field. The user is going to enter a product in a text field. The green component is going to say when it's buying or ordering the product, and then we're going to come back and determine when the product was actually ordered. So basically, let's run through the UI. This is what it looks like initially. The green area says buying to a product ? Because you haven't ordered anything yet. You're going to type a product in the field. So suppose we type iPad. The green markup fragment is going to say buying to a product iPad. And after that is complete, you're going to see something displayed in the blue area that says the product iPad with quantity 2 has been ordered. Now, you could do that a number of different ways in an application, but not in the sense of reusable component templates within Angular. So the idea behind this exercise is to show you component communication, component design, and how to reuse components. So it sounds to me, based on my very vague specifications, that the buying to a product iPad looks like a buying component or an ordering component with a green front end. And so I'm thinking about how to design this application as we're talking. The blue area looks like where all the functionality is. You're typing in an input field, and there's some dynamic data showing in the green field, in the green area. So you have to try to understand what you're trying to build here and when you're building reusable components. Now, let me go one step further into showing you the order of the components, or the order of the dynamics. And the first thing you do is you type in iPad. The second thing is it says buying to a product iPad. The third thing is the product iPad with quantity 2 has been ordered. So it has to occur in that order. And so you want to build an Angular application, as simple as this may be, so that those dynamics are preserved. Now, we're going to show you the application right now. It's not perfect. And certainly my goal in here is to show you the simplest form of communication. And the communication I'm showing you is parent component, the child component, the parent component. And I'm trying to combine them in a simple way. But you'll notice that once you develop this, there's a lot of issues that come up, and you have to handle all those. But what you're trying to do initially for this exercise, and the goal of my requirements, is do number 1, followed by number 2, followed by number 3. So let's take a look at the code and try to understand how to do that. Now, I'm going to think out loud here and just tell you what I'm thinking. Okay, the turquoise background is my index.html. The Dodger blue background is my root component of my Angular application. How do I make that determination? Like I said, the blue area is where the user is going to be typing in stuff and dynamic strings are going to be occurring and changing. So the blue area looks like my main application, my root component. The green area could still be my root component if I really wanted to, but I'm going to decide that this is going to be an ordering component, a child component of the root component, which is the parent component. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that when the user types in iPad in the parent, it communicates to the child component, which is the green one, and it takes the product iPad and it purchases two, let's say it orders two of that product, and it tells you that it's buying it, and after it's purchased or ordered, basically it's going to notify the parent, that is the green component, child component is going to notify the parent that the product iPad with quantity 2 has been ordered. And I could just do that with a simple string. So this is the goal. Now, my decision here, before I tell you or show you my code, one of my decisions is to build a child component which is embedded inside the parent component. And my other decision is I'm going to make it a reusable component. Tell me what product to order, I would automatically purchase two of them. And so it's a simple example. Okay, so let's take a look at the application. So here is well, let's take a look at the application. Let's take a look at the application functioning. So here is the application that's functioning. Of course, remember, I actually I'm in my project. I've started the server, and now I'm hitting on localhost 4200. So I have a couple of things going on over here. So basically, I just want to show you the responsiveness of the application. The user comes here, and notice the default string here, buying two a product, question mark. Okay, so keep that in mind. I'm going to type in iPad here, and notice how quickly the response happens. You can't tell the order in which some of those strings got displayed, but what did happen is this component ordered, when it was finished, it displayed this to the parent. So it's a little bit it's complex in a simple example. So let's take a look at the code. Okay, so what I did was I created a project called communication, and then what I did and so let's just show you how to do that. You go to new project, you go to Angular CLI, you type in communication, and you hit create. Always use Angular CLI within your WebStorm to create your projects. Now when you do that, it does the scaffolding, it creates all the resources that are needed. It creates the configuration files, and one of the most important ones that I look at initially is the Angular CLI JSON file. This one shows me everything about my project, the project name, the apps folder, the root source, the distribution directory where my build goes, the index.html that's being used, the main driver which is driving my Angular application. Now through a lot of my tutorials I keep the same main driver, but you can change main drivers. You could have multiple drivers in a project. You could do anything you want. But I like keeping things separate, simple for the user, so that the student could understand the simplicity. The project's as simple as possible. So here's my main.tss and ts, and everything else in the project is for testing and unit test and end-to-end test and stuff like that. There is an environment source here which every project uses. So let's move forward. Okay, so the important thing to understand here is I have a source directory and I have a project. My node modules are all being used for the project, and my index.html is driving my application. There's an app-root tag here, which doesn't look familiar because it's part of the root component of the Angular application. The Angular application is a tree of component templates, and the custom tags in your project are all your components. So this one is embedded in the index.html. This is where the Angular application root component loads, and all its children in the tree get instantiated, etc. Okay, and also notice I have a style sheet here where I colored the background turquoise, and this div tag might not be used anywhere, but let's move forward. Okay, so that's the index.html. Then I have the Angular CLI file says that my main driver is going to drive my Angular application. So let's do this. Let's go and enter presentation mode so we could see things a little bit clearer. Okay, so we're going to go and enter presentation mode. And let's take a look at the main files. Okay, so this is main.ts. This is the driver. Now notice I'm importing enable prod mode. If the environment is production, this will run the application in production mode, turns off assertions for development and things like that. But we're running in development here. There's a platform browser dynamic which bootstraps my app module, and here I have my custom app module. So the main driver is always pretty much the same. It's always booting up my application module. My application module must exist for my Angular application. So let's go take a look at it. It's really where my main application is. Now remember, the drivers could be different. I could be bootstrapping different app modules, whatever, but it's really the app module which is my custom code. So here I look at the project, and what I have here is an app module, and let's take a look at this. Okay, so I'm importing browser module, ng module, app module, and order component. Now, when I look at the browser module you need for all your browser applications, if you want to know precisely what's in there, you can go into the node modules and go look in there. But browser applications need that support, so we basically import that here because our module is using it. The ng module supports the annotation. And when my declarations really show my custom components. And the bootstrap shows which components being bootstrapped. So that is pointing to my root component. So loosely speaking, my app module is a class. It's getting booted by the main.ts, and it boots the app component root component. And my declarations show me I have two custom components. So this order component better be a child of this app component, because my Angular application is a root component or a tree of components, and if this order component is not a child of the app component, it's not going to be used in my Angular application. Okay, so let's go look at the application. So here's my application component. My application component has imports a component and an input. The component gives me the annotation to define my selector. We saw this in the index.html. It defines the metadata of the component, and notice my template is external. My styles URLs is an external file. So the annotation, as soon as I add the annotation to this app component class, it turns it into a UI component template. And well, I'm going to just say a UI component. If there's a template, then there's going to be a template associated with it. So now the input that I'm importing is used down here. So let's take a look at the app component class. The app component class has a product string, and then there's this input at input left paren right paren product ordered string. Now that annotation basically allows me to construct this component that takes input. What does that mean? I have an Angular application. When some data changes in the root, let's say in the parent component, Angular is going to pass that data to the input of this component if this component is a child component, and if the template has a parameter which passes into the component. Okay, so let's review it. You got a component template here. In this case, it's the root component. So the bottom line is it has an input. So anyone could pass data to it. So the question is, how does that happen? And that could happen a number of ways. It could happen if this component is a child component and a parent passes it through a template. It could happen if this is the root component and there's a child component and the child component notifies the parent. Okay, so right now I might have misspoken. Okay, this is the parent component. It has an input parameter, and the way it gets defined and passed in is a notification event happens with a message, and the message gets invokes this function, and a product order gets defined, and that's the input of this component. Okay, so it's a little bit complex, but let's come back to it, because this is step number 3 is getting this event right. We didn't even focus on step number 2. So let's look at the component in a coarse-grained fashion. We have an app component with a product string. Let's go to the template. We've got a template of this component with an input. There's a placeholder. The placeholder says enter product iPad, and upon changing the fields, this syntax here means this is a directive that says on a change event of this input field, invoke the onInput function of the component. So let's go back and look at the onInput of the component. OnInput event. The event comes into the onInput function. TypeScript syntax says, get the event.target and give it to me as an argument. That's what this syntax means. It's a left curly bracket, target, which means I know you're passing in an event, and I know that event has a target object. Give it to me and get the value of it and put it in product. You know, there's some things wrong with this. Okay, I'm not handling if there's nothing in the input field. Could target be null? You know, that type of thing. But let's bypass that, because I did notice some things in application which aren't proper. But I'm just trying to show you simple things with baby steps. So I think we understand what happens when the user types in the input field. Let's review it once more. We have an input tag which takes a change event and invokes an onInput. We pass in the $ input. We pass in the $ event. into the function. We could have passed the $sign. We could have passed the event.target, the event.target value, but the component on input event got invoked. Okay, remember, once we build this component template, you've got a template running which is delivering functionality as the user is interacting with it. The backing app component class has been instantiated. You've got state object in backing this template, and so the directive of the event invokes this function on input event and passes the target. And the product winds up being the value of the target, which is the value of the input field. Okay, so let's move on to see what happens, what else happens. Okay, so let me go back here. So what's happening is we just defined, okay, so we just defined the product. Okay, so let's go back to the template. Okay, now, when I entered the input field, the change event happened, the on input event happened, the object in the back of the template got a new value for product. Here we have a child component called order processor. And this tag, or let's say this child component template, looks at the new value of product. And this syntax is a directive which says, take the item of this child component and map it to the values that are being changed in product. Okay, another way to look at it is I have a root component template with an input field, and I typed in an input field, and it got the on input event occurred, and it changed the product attribute in the backing object, and the change detection of Angular says, okay, let me now reevaluate the template. The product in this value here now changed. So basically, this child is taking an input parameter from the parent, and it's mapping that value to item, and it's also taking a parameter which is a static parameter too. So this child component order processor, whatever the name of that component is taking a product value and a quantity value, and it's looking at those. The product is changing dynamically as the user is typing in the input field. The quantity, excuse me, the quantity is 2. It's a constant. Now, the child component order processor does its thing, and then when it's finished, it emits an event. It changes one of its attributes, and one of its attributes could be called product ordered. And when it does, it emits an event, and this syntax says catch that event and invoke an on notify of the parent component. So it's a little bit confusing here about, which functions are being invoked on the parent, which ones are being invoked on the child. But I can tell you this, you must look at the templates to understand how a parent root component is communicating with the child component, and how a child component is communicating with the parent component. It doesn't happen in the code in the back. It happens in the templates. Now, I'm saying code in the back. This is all browser code. It's all related. It's all event-driven code. It's all JavaScript. But try to understand, I like to picture it as backing objects and templates. It's component templates, but I like to look at it as the templates are defining the component tree. The backing objects are the state, and you have to communicate through the template. So here I have a root component. It's my app component. I'm looking at its template. And the user types in a string. When the string changes on input, changes the value of the root component, parent component, let's say, that value comes back here to the child component, which is order processor. It changes the item inside the order processor component. Work is done, something happens, and an event is emitted called product ordered is changed, and its value is emitted. An onNotify event occurs, and that's the function of the parent, not the child. Now I'm going to speak for Angular 4, not 5, or maybe Angular 2. You can't catch this event that's emitted in the child up at the parent. It introduces a type, well, I'm going to say it introduces a type coupling, but a tight coupling, but I might be misspeaking here. What I can say is, based on what I know right now, the event that's admitted product ordered can't go up the parent. It can only go to the child tag, and this onNotify is the parent's function. So let's just move on. Let's see what Angular 5 offers us and see whether things change, and we'll record it. Okay, so I think we know what that thing's doing. Let's go and look at the order component. Okay, so we basically said that the parent component, the app component, is talking to a child, and the child has a selector order processor. And so I know I'm looking at the proper component, okay? And it's called order processor. My component, I called it order component. It's exporting a class. It's importing component, input, output, event emitter, etc. I have the selector. I know where that's being used. It has an external template, an external style sheet. I'll look at those in a minute. But I get an input of the quantity number, which I know is static. It's 2, right? And I got an output, which is the product ordered. It's an event emitter of type string, and I instantiate it as a generic type event emitter of type string, and that's the thing that's coming out. So and then I have another input, which is item, right? Remember that the product value of the parent was coming in, and I was aliasing it to item inside my child component. So that is the set item function here. When the value comes in, it comes in. I log a string sending order to buy product. This item of quantity, this quantity, and then I define this product ordered, and I emit the event. So I use this.productOrdered.emit, and I emit a string. Now I'm doing some fancy things here. I'm using a setter function. I'm using an input annotation. The thing, and I'm also logging sending order to buy product. I'm using the backtick marker here, and I'm using this syntax, this directive to get the value of the item and embed it within a string. I think these are called string literals. The backtick allows you to do a multi-line string. When you embed these dynamic $ left parens, it's referred to as a string literal. I'm logging a string which can be multi-lined, at the same time can contain dynamic values of my object. Okay, so item and quantity are already defined when I'm going through this function call here. Okay, and the string that I emit as the product this dot item with quantity this dot quantity has been ordered. So now when I emit that, that's an output, product ordered. Notice, if it's an output product ordered, I catch that event that's emitted right here. The tricky thing, which I find confusing, is this function is of the parent, not the child. And of course, it probably makes sense because if you emit an event, you'd want it to propagate up to the parent, and there's no event bubbling. But at the same time, if there's an event at the child, you might want to invoke a function of the child. So it's a little confusing. Okay, so let's look at the template of the order component. Oh, this is very simple. This basically says buying quantity, and I use the interpolation operator here. The double curly brackets, that takes the quantity of the order component value, and it says buying 2 of product, and then basically you've got this item, but what I found is there's this little bug. Well, I won't get into that. What I do is I say display the item. If the item is undefined, I just put a question mark here. So I basically show this. So once again, let me just run through the important aspect of the communication. The important thing to know here is that you're communicating through the templates. Okay, so and like I said, I try not to get too involved in implementation of what Angular's doing behind the scenes. I want to understand. You have to be able to look at an application and figure out what it's doing. You also have to be able to architect and design applications, so you want to figure out the best way to do that. So I'm going to leave you with this before we look at the front end. Again, I'm going to tell you that I have this main root component template, which is my application. It has a child component because I see this custom tag. There's a backing object for the root component. There's a backing object for the order component. And the events and the sharing of data and communication, I visually see through the template. Even before I start doing implementation, right? So here, input field, when I change it, I invoke a function. Basically, it invokes the onInput. The onInput changes the value in the root component of product. Product changes here. Its item is an input parameter. I could use this directive to say when product changes, change my item. The child also says, when you reevaluate that, pass me 2. I'm going to do some work and emit an event called product ordered. And when that does happen, invoke notify and update the product ordered of the root component, and then we'll see the result in the root component. Okay, so here it is again. I enter a product name, iPad Pro. that value got passed to this component. This component ordered, showed a string saying buying to a product iPad 2, iPad Pro rather, and then it emitted event up to the parent, and the parent displayed the product iPad Pro with quantity 2 has been ordered. So that's all we wanted to do for this particular exercise. Now, it's a tutorial. I did a lot of talking. I apologize, but there's a lot of stuff here you really need to understand. And believe me, you don't want to suffer for hours and hours and hours like someone who's doing research and understanding in order to train you with a particular tutorial. So keep in mind that there are many ways to do this. I took the component reusable component approach. I used communication. I used a parent, a child component, and I did an exercise and a tutorial which I thought might be of some value in a wide variety of areas in Angular, using input annotations, output annotations, communicating from parent to child, from child to parent, and then one more thing I just want to say is if there were multiple child here and they had to communicate, one child had to communicate to the parent had to communicate to the child, you would use the same sort of annotations, but you'd be using the parent for a mediator, and that's a new mediator pattern. And so if you want to learn all about communication, we have a very extensive course. Please join our website and take the online course. And thank you for your time.